Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited for this, maybe not so traditional topic that we usually jump into this time of year, but it is a special time, and we really want to discuss round three and whether you should apply. And if you think you might be thinking about it, you might be well prepared. Is it a good option for you? And then how to do it. So I am so excited to today be joined by, first I'll introduce myself. I'm Michel Belden, formerly working at Wharton as an associate director of admissions and now a director at Fortuna, joined by Emma Bond, one of our directors as well. And her background is at LBS, and Jonathan Masland, who is also a director at Fortuna and has his background at Tux. So we are all going to join together to talk about round three. And I'm going to have Jonathan start us off. And again, traditionally, what has round three been? Like, kind of set the scene for us, Jonathan, in the sense of we just finished up, round one is done, round two interview invites are coming out now. And so round three is next on the to-do list before we go to the next cycle. So why don't you start us off on what this is traditionally meant for? Again, we're going to first focus on the US schools.
Sure. No, thank you, Michelle, and for the intro. I will say I'm in New England. It's I think -5 degrees this morning outside of Tuck, as Michelle, and she's in Los Angeles. So I'm a little jealous. Not to mention the painful football Super Bowl loss last night. So I'll lick in my wounds, but I picked it up and super excited. To join you and be part of this group. I do come from a career services background, and so have that mindset. But in terms of what we've traditionally looked at for round three, which is most of the seats have been allocated. So it's really about historically threading the needle, so to speak, of being that super strong, perfect candidate. Is that's the ones that would really be considered, and from a Fortuna perspective, coach you to really seriously consider it historically. And I think another piece is a little nuanced in the sense that schools are looking at their profiles, right, in terms of the data, and what does our average GMAT score look like, or do we need more international students, or how does the gender makeup look? But it's school by school, and there's no way to predict. So again, historically, if we've coached folks, hey, let's just look at round one next year. So that's kind of the historical round three perspective.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I didn't really say this before. I think the reason, and to that point, what has it traditionally been? Why is this year different? And what we've heard and we've been seeing is this slump with the international, applicants. The schools typically, we tell our clients, fill their classes with round one and round two. But we really feel like this kind of might be, I think we said it as the once in a decade opportunity to really have an opportunity to be admitted to one of your, when the programs of these top programs, this round three. So this is really an opportunity that we do want to kind of walk you through. And we want to say, like, why is it? And I think it's just due to this massive drop in the international
Yeah.
applicants. And so where can you come in? So, like I said, so here we are. So this is, I never forgot that this is the next slide. I set you up, but it's really right. I thought we were going to skip that, but it's like, how did we get here, right, Jonathan? So
Yeah, absolutely. And historically, I've spent way more time speaking with immigration lawyers over the years to understand the nuances of the H-1B, to help students get sponsored. And basically, there's three things that have happened. One, there has been a fundamental policy shift around the H-1B, which has caused international applications to drop. And I think the other just geopolitical perception of the U.S. issues that has also led to international numbers to be lower. So that's kind of the fundamental driver, which I think creates a wonderful opportunity for anyone looking at round three, but perhaps even a bit more international students as the classes because we're always designing the class, right? And we want that international perspective. And if there are fewer applicants, it could be just a once in a decade opportunity for round three.
Yeah. And Emma, what I think is interesting is like, now let's look at the perspective you can talk to us about is like, what are the admissions committees thinking? Like putting ourselves back in those seats and being like, okay, what have our numbers
Mm,
looked like? And really, what are they, assessing in terms of all their buckets and where are we at and who are we going to really be looking for in this round three?
mm, mm. Yeah, hi Michelle. I should say I'm joining you both from the UK where it is sort of average winter temperatures, but it has not stopped raining since about January the 1st. So if
Oh,
you're in LA, Michelle, and you have
yes.
some nice sunshine there, I am also very jealous. Um, Yeah, so it is a really interesting year. We know from sort of our ear to the ground with our connections across the different schools that some schools have seen up to a 30% decrease in applicant numbers, and that is largely driven by a drop in international candidates. Um, so I always think that this is a really interesting point of the year, a pivotal point of the year in admissions terms, because schools are balancing how they are building out their class. They are looking at the profile of the candidates that they've admitted from round one, that they have coming through the pipeline in round two. And then they're looking to sort of see by the time they get to September that they're going to have a very well balanced class in terms of all the different kind of metrics that they want to hit. So that's internationals, that's domestic, that's gender, that's all the different aspects that they consider. Um, at this point, you've got schools whose AdComs are looking at yield from round one. So that's a number of people who accept their places after an offer is made. And if you think about candidates, the people that we work with, they will often apply to a range of schools, not just one. It's not normally sensible to put all your eggs in one basket when you're targeting top schools. So say you have a candidate who's applying to Harvard and Stanford and Wharton, for example, if they're a good, strong candidate, they are likely to get, or they may potentially get offers from two or more of those schools, in which case they then have a choice to make. And the admissions committees are sitting there. They might be trying to attract with scholarships, but at the end of the day, one of those schools or two of those schools are going to lose out. So yield is important for schools. It contributes to the rankings metrics, which at the end of the day, shows where schools are going to stack up in things like the FT rankings. So schools at this point in the year, they're juggling that. They're also looking at the kind of quality of candidates that have applied in round two. They're starting to get a feel for the caliber of candidates that have applied in round two. And we were talking a bit earlier before the webinar about all the different interviews that are rolling out for different schools and decisions still to come out for schools like Wharton and London Business School. So schools are having seen who has accepted and who hasn't accepted from round one and who's still perhaps in the balance, they're starting to look at gaps. So what areas do they need to fill? Where are they a little bit light? Do they have a particular cluster coming from finance or from consulting? Where do they need to rebalance to make sure that those candidates, those students who start in September have the best possible learning experience? And then when we have a year like this, where we know that applicant numbers are down, then we get the idea of reputational risk, right? So under enrolling, which obviously impacts school revenues, but also weakening quality. So schools do not want to lower their standards just to fill seats. But at the end of the day, what that means is as we come into round three, where traditionally, like you say, we have said, perhaps especially for the top US schools, not really a good idea. Most of the places are full. This year, it's sort of an unprecedented moment where potentially there are some good spots available.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point to make. I mean, I also want to point out HBS got rid of their round three a couple of years
They
ago
did.
now. So they actually are the one of the top business schools that don't have a round three, but everyone else does. And all
Mm,
those points that you made are really interesting, especially I think the last one of they aren't going to lower their standards for sure. Like that's not going to come into
yeah.
consideration. But it's really, Emma, if you can continue to talk about is like, okay, so
Yeah.
really who should consider then, is this the
Mm,
right moment for them? Because I would say, and I think you'll go over this and Jonathan would agree, the unprepared, unfocused, still not your time. So you really need
Never.
to be, never. So, but who
yeah.
are the right people to really consider, okay, maybe I should throw my hat in the ring?
Mm. So it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we do have this conversation with candidates all the way through the year in terms of, when is the best time for you to apply? And that is always, regardless of round, when you are ready and when you are well prepared, when you have a thoughtful narrative put together, and when you have secured your, for you, optimal test score. So I think there is definitely opportunity this year in round three, but you have to weigh up whether that opportunity is the right sort of fit for you at the present time. So if, for example, you were thinking of applying to round two, but perhaps you were a little bit late coming to the party because you needed an extra test take, or you had a project or something come up at work and it suddenly got really crazy busy and you didn't get through your essays sort of in the way that you wanted, or you didn't have time to sort of polish your application. If you had perhaps been looking forward to round one for applying this coming September for entry in 2027, I have to get my years, they start to roll in onto each other. So if you had been targeting that, but you have sort of all your ducks in a row, if you like, and you have taken your GMAT, your GRE, you are happy with your score, you feel it is the best representation of your capabilities, then potentially round three is something that you should think about. Credible post MBA goals. So that's a non-negotiable whenever you apply. There is no point applying to any school, whether it is a top Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, an M7, a top 10, an international school, if you haven't really thought through what your post MBA and then your medium to longer term goal looks like. So, Jonathan will be able to attest to this as a career services background. Careers teams are looking for students who can come to them with a credible plan in place, with something that makes sense when you weigh it up with a candidate's previous background, married with what they're learning on the program, and something that will be ambitious, but also be realistic as they move forwards. And I think in this year in round three, that's going to be equally as important, because we all know that the recruiting scenario has been tough, right, for the past couple of years. So I don't see that changing. We hope it does in the next couple of years, but not necessarily sooner than it's likely to. Well-developed leadership stories. So I think we always say show, don't tell. So candidates that can come to the table with, again, thoughtful leadership examples. Where have you demonstrated your ability to solve problems, to take decisions under pressure? What are the examples that you can call on from particularly the last year, the last couple of years, either in your work experience, but also in your extracurriculars. So those need to be thought through. There's no point sort of coming to round three and having to sort of sit down and really think, well, I don't have anything. You don't have time to go back and say, well, actually, I'm going to start building up some of those sort of extracurricular things which are going to support my profile. Visas, yeah, we know that the H-1B visa issue has been causing some problems in the US. And so if you are an international applicant and if you are planning to stay and work in the US afterwards, and if you need to get your visa sorted before you come into the US to study, you need to check out. So I know, for example, that some of my Indian candidates, even who've applied in round two, who are heading off to the US, getting their visa appointments in the consular offices can be really, really difficult. So just sort of check out your local situation and make sure that you can get those things together. And then we just mentioned here about anything that's happened, particularly in your profile more recently. So you may have been promoted since the round two deadlines in January. You may have known that potentially was coming up, but it hadn't actually dropped. You might have delivered a specific win, a particularly meaningful project that you can share as an example. You may have taken on extra mentorship or leadership at work. So it can be any of those things. But if you've got something that is a really concrete value add, you can add all those things together. And if you can perhaps fill in for one of the M7s, even a gap in a sort of where maybe a sort of not a consultant, not a banker, but we're not saying those shouldn't apply, but perhaps gaps in the class profile, then yeah, sometimes it's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And I think what it reminds me of like you said, Emma, is these are the same things we discuss with our clients in round one and in round two, and that you're fully committed, right? And that you can demonstrate, how you're going to come in and contribute to the community, as well as the thoughtfulness of the planning of what do I want to do next and how's that MBA program going to help me and prepare me to get there. So I think it will be fun, but we'll see. Jonathan's going to take us through some profiles. Like we're going to give a couple of examples, just kind of what will hopefully we believe will work in this round three, and what does a strong, prepared, and hopefully successful applicant look like for round three?
Yeah, no, thank you. And just high level point to think about that you could literally save a year, right?
Oh,
If
yeah.
you could get it this year and not next year. Obviously the table stakes are, I'm a strong candidate no matter what. I'm clear on my career goals. And here's the thing, like you're a high performer, you can get it done for round three, right? I mean, if you can't, then we'll help you. So, but I channeled a couple of my clients as I thought about sharing what I would like people to consider to apply. And one is Sam, who I'm very dear with. He got the promotion, right? So you don't want to apply, disrupt, and not get your promotion. So sometimes waiting, but he locked it in, and now listen, he got the bonus, he got the promotion. Now let's save a year and get going. So if something like that, has happened to you, it could be a promotion, it could be, my business was sold or something like that, a transactional experience that then made you pop your head up and look at applying. And that's impressive. Another is, I think about, the general manager, the person, who's on the call, who works for a business that manages a P&L, that has clients, that has employees, that wants to someday run a business and knows that the MBA is going to be an event, an experience that'll accelerate it. And the next big step is several years away, right? So, clearly MBA will help you with the soft skills, leadership, and you're strong. So you're working in an industry, you should definitely look at applying. That's another, I think group, and really the goal here in sharing is for you to look at yourself and see if it applies. And this is kind of the nonprofit schools look to make a difference, right? We want our classes to have those that are dedicated to improving the world, and in a wonderful place is those that they're an executive director for a nonprofit. They started the nonprofit, and really are looking for the MBA to help build the business skills that may not have been part of what their social mission had been, or that, hey, the private sector is the place where I want to bring my social mission orientation, and the MBA is the way to give me the credibility and to make that transition. Again, wonderful leadership, abilities and experience in the nonprofit, public sector, and with the public, I would definitely include those in the military that have, maybe there's been a promotion, or there's, you're going to get, there's a natural place for you to look at an MBA. And the other one, this isn't listed here, but I would like entrepreneurs that have, and I was speaking with a woman the other day, she built a business, it's profitable, she wants to scale it, right? And the MBA is a wonderful place to go and to continue to work in the business while an MBA, and to help, build the abilities and build the network and the credibility to scale the business. So if you're an entrepreneur that has gotten to that inflection point, I definitely think, again, save a year, round three would make sense. I've had a lot of fun working with some international students that they're a leader within their family business or the family office. I have one gentleman it's a startup family office. So they're literally, it's like a startup, but a family office. And he's going to use the MBA to really put the whole framework and the business plan together. And again, the MBA is just such wonderful training again, hard skills, soft skills, for a member of the family business who's international. And what's really nice is there's really no, there's not the H-1B risk, right? In the sense that you have the family business, to lean on if you decide that that's the best path versus, a couple of years of consulting or something like that. So those are a few, the profiles that, if they were to speak to me, I would encourage to apply. Michelle, Emma, certainly throw in a couple more profiles, but these certainly resonate with me.
I mean, I agree. I think that's a great overview because I think what it shows you is there's no right. They're just looking for this type of person with this type of background. And so, like Jonathan said, like, where do you see yourself maybe fit or that sounds like you? Because they're viable, right? Like, I think the admissions offices are going to be very interested in your trajectory. Where have you been? Where are you headed? As well as, again, typically round three has been for, what industries have not been, the more non-traditional, haven't really been captured yet. But we think there's just a bigger opening for many other backgrounds at this point. And I think our next slide, again, to kind of go over both the top US schools and international, maybe Emma can speak to this as well. But Jonathan, again, it's like ultimately, I think it's really open to many different backgrounds, right? As you went over. And I love that you even brought in the entrepreneurs, and where are they at? And again, as long as they're not just saying, oh, that might be a good idea, but they have thought about it and they've really kind of, reflected on how this will benefit them and they can, share that. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I think just reflecting on a prior slide of just those that should apply, those that have the basic fundamentals, a clear, strong numbers in terms of, their GMATs, clear goals, and the clear goals get you to why the MBA. And then I guess the other is like, hey, I was definitely going to, apply in round one. I know I want to do an MBA, and my God, like, why? Like, maybe I can save a year, right? And I have strong quants, right? So they're not going to worry about it inside the school. They know I'm going to be fine in stats, accounting, et cetera. And then, the last, the one that international students, I do think that, with there being lower numbers, and if you feel comfortable coming, those that are international, I think you're going to have an opportunity, both not just to get in, but to get in perhaps at a better school than potentially had expected. So those are a couple comments on the profiles.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to quickly jump in there, I think that's true. I think I've been working with a couple of candidates this year who have perhaps lower test scores than some of the top US schools would traditionally have looked at, and they have been put through to interview for round two, and round one candidates received offers from some really great schools. So I think they're not changing the parameters as such, but I think there is more flex and they are more prepared to look at other indicators of success and potential than perhaps just the test scores. And of course, then what that means is that if you are perhaps a more traditional candidate looking at round three, but you have a really strong quant and a really strong test score, that whole point about sort of the schools filling in gaps, there's that gap to be filled as well, right? The schools want their high rankings. They want the GMAT averages to be up where you're scoring points in the rankings methodology. So it is a really interesting point, right, in the year. And so I do think for perhaps more traditional candidates, but ones that can really bring value add in terms of sort of different aspects of their profile and that high quant, yeah, for sure. That's something that the schools are going to be looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Emma. That's, I think, definitely true. So people kind of think about that. So we're going to now have Emma take us to the other part of, okay, maybe who shouldn't apply? Like, and again, just as we so appreciate everyone joining us today, or if you're watching us later as it's been taped, it's like, as you're thinking about where you're at, maybe like who are maybe not the right profiles candidates that need a little bit more time and to kind of push to that next, round one.
And just as I start this, I can see some Q&A, some questions popping up from people. So just to reassure you, we will get round to those shortly. So this comes with a caveat, right? Who should not apply in round three? The parameters that you should be considering will differ depending on which schools you are
Right.
considering, right? So the M7 is different from the top, the T15, T20 in the US, and then international schools have a later round or later rounds already built into their process in a way that a lot of the US schools do not. So, for example, London Business School, where I used to work, we used to have 4 rounds. They now only have 3, but that's just still a part of their admissions process. A school like HEC in France, they have a really cool sort of jury system, they call it, as part of their application process, but they actually have a round every month, basically running all year. INSEAD has 2 intakes. They have September and then they have January. So they have admissions dates all through the year. So generally speaking, the international schools are more accepting of round threes and actually actively welcome round three applications. So that's something that if you are still considering applying this year, you can definitely look at those options, especially people who are perhaps not willing to give the US a go this year, because there are some, unfortunately, because of, as Jonathan was saying, the geopolitical situation. So who should not apply, though, to any school, anywhere, in round three? Candidates with a very common profile. So again, I think there's a caveat on that. I think the fact that we know that application numbers have dropped by around 30% at some of the top schools in the US. I would say even if you have a common profile, if other parts of your application really stand out, I would say, you've probably got a better chance than you would any other year. So there are sort of shifting boundaries on this. But if you are still not sure on your goals, if you haven't done your due diligence in terms of which schools you are targeting, you haven't been to any information sessions, you haven't joined any webinars, you haven't made any attempt to visit some of the schools you are really passionate about, then I think you really need to consider whether round three is the right time, or whether you would boost your candidacy by taking a longer term view and looking at round one. If you don't have your test score under your belt at this point in the year, you're still struggling to hit a score that you think is going to be competitive, then that should be something that you are sort of looking at. You can only take the test once every, what is it, Michelle, 4 weeks now they've changed the
I
date
know the
slightly,
time.
but
Yeah.
yeah, the timing. So I think it's every 4 weeks. So if you think you are still going to need a couple of goes to get the score that you think is truly representative of your capabilities, then perhaps again, round three is something that you shouldn't be looking at. You should be thinking, I'm going to take the summer, I've got a bit of downtime, I'm going to really get myself a tutor, and I'm going to present myself in the best light at the right time, which for me is round one. Then that's again something you should consider. One of the things that sometimes candidates aren't aware of is that for most schools, the amount of scholarship funding that they have available is generally dispersed in round one and round two. So if you are somebody who is going to be reliant on scholarships as a part of to make up a gap in your funding, then again, this might not be the right time for you. Most schools will either award monies when the offer is made in round one or round two, or they will have a date the following sort of week or 2 weeks after the offers come out, where they'll sort of allocate a bunch of funding at once. But often when that money has run out, it's run out, and they don't tend to put their hands back in their pockets too much for candidates who apply late. And then the last one there is pretty much a given. If you are looking at round three as a test run, I really strongly advise you not to do that. If you do it as a test run just to see what happens, and you haven't thought through all the things we've talked about, it means generally that you are somebody that would have been better off applying in round one. If you get dinged in round three, and then you think, oh, I'm just going to apply again in round one, it actually becomes really difficult to show a meaningful progression from the time you get your rejection in round three to the time the applications go in round one. So say you apply in March, April, you find out May that you've been rejected. By September, you suddenly have to say, oh, within that 3-month period, you have to prove better leadership or a better test score or a combination of all of those things. And it can become much more difficult for you to prove that. So in that regard, if you are considering round three as a test run, I would say just hold your horses, wait, and take your time, get things ready to go and apply in round one.
Yeah, those are such great points. The two that I just want to that you highlighted, that one is the outreach and research, which I kind of didn't even
Mm,
think about, but that is something on my first call with clients, just even when, a fit call is you need to start doing that from day one, depending on if you
mm,
have 4 weeks away from the deadline, you have 4 months. And I think especially for round three, it is very evident. I mean, depending on the school, but I'm thinking most of, I'll say the top US business schools right now, as I think of them, there is a question somehow, somewhere that you need to have knowledge of what's the ethos on campus, what is the culture, and how is that really attractive to you? And again, as I said before, what are you going to bring and how will you demonstrate what you're going to contribute to that? And that takes time to understand
mm,
that. And the
mm.
last thing is, I think it's definitely do just not throw your hat in the ring because you think, let's see, and then I can apply round one. If you cannot show as a reapplicant in round one, or even if it's round two, improved candidacy, the improved test score, et cetera, because you really just kind of, had the 2 weeks and threw something together, it is evident to them and it's going to hurt you at the end of the day.
Mm,
It's not going to
mm.
help you just to try to let's see what happens around three. And that goes to Emma. This is okay, as we just work with our clients and are putting together their applications, round one, two, or three, what does a strong application look like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time
Yeah.
on this because I think we've covered a lot of it already. But what it comes down to is applying when you are ready. And that's not, not when you've got just a piece of your application ready. It's when you can put everything together in this really sort of complex jigsaw that adds up to this beautiful picture of your holistic profile, um, which means strong test scores. So everybody, what people's opinion of a strong test score will differ depending on you, depending on the school that you are targeting. But most candidates will have a general understanding of what the average GRE or GMAT score is for their target schools. If your score is not there or thereabouts for the schools that you are targeting, it's going to be more difficult for you. It's certainly not impossible. There is a really wide range across most schools. And if everything else in your profile is standout, you have great leadership, great extracurriculars, you have a stratospheric promotional track at work, then schools are, quite often willing to take a punt on you. But for round three, I think, you want that strong test score under your belt. Decisive positioning, we talked, Jonathan's given some really great examples of the kind of candidates that schools will be looking at. Yeah, I mean, Michelle and I are working with this great family business candidate who is applying and now interviewing at schools in the US. So we know that there is room for that because if you can go back, excuse me, to a job, to a family business, then you are not a risk for schools in terms of placement. Highly school specific essays. I mean, Michelle and I just touched on this before, but if you think about how sophisticated the school's CRM systems are now, they track your communication points with the school, right? The first webinar you sign up for with your email, you are on the system and they will know sort of how often you've been involved and reached out and what kind of discussions you've had. If you apply to London Business School, on the actual application form, there's a question right at the top which says, has the candidate attended an information event? Yes or no? If so, how many? So they track these things and it does have real implication for the success of your application. Are you genuinely interested in this school, or are you just throwing the application out there because it's a kind of Hail Mary at the end of the admission season? Recommendations. This is something we haven't talked about. This is a really important point, and when we start working with clients, regardless of what round it is, it's one of the first things we encourage people to do, and that is to make sure that your recommenders are ready to go, because sometimes it can take much. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of specific clients I've got at the moment who are ripping their hair out because their recommenders are taking a long time, but sometimes it can take you much longer than you think to really select your recommenders, prepare them, make them aware of what's expected, and then get the actual recommendation sort of from them and submitted into the school. And then we've talked a bit about intent. You need to be really able to convince an admissions committee that you are passionate about this particular school. So whether it's Wharton or whether it's Tuck, or whether it's London Business School, wherever it is, you need to be able to convince them that this particular school is your number one choice and that you have no intention of going anywhere else, so that if they make you an offer, they know you are likely to accept it. So for round three, probably more than any other round, that yield figure, that sort of betting on someone that they're going to accept the offer that is made, is really important, because this is when schools are finalizing those last seats on the class. So making sure that they have a full class component by the time term starts is really, really important.
Absolutely. These are all great points. The new one really was the recommenders. Thank you, Emma, for that, because it takes time, and it's funny that you're laughing and I laugh too, because it's not always easy, and it's on the candidate as well. And it's something that you do have to help guide them through even before you select them. And so again, just looking at the calendar and looking at what maybe 1, 2, round 3 schools, and working backwards to give your recommenders as well the time to prepare and write you a strong letter of recommendation. It is quite an important piece of the application. So that is something you'll want to maybe after, reflect on as well. And will those people step up and, be able to do it in that time frame? Okay, Jonathan, as we continue to look at round 3, we're going to kind of, both you and Emma, look at it, by the different programs that, we know our clients come to us to work on, the M7s, the top 20, and our international programs. So kind of, the reality of round 3 and kind of where we're going to kind of give our advice of what that looks like and feels like right now this year.
No, in high level, I think it kind of encompasses all 3 of these buckets, but they're, take, and this was referenced earlier, take a portfolio approach strategy, in the sense of, don't just pick one school or pick the 2 schools that are, I'm just going to do Harvard and Stanford, right? So, think about across the breadth of these 3 buckets, but the second piece is anchor it in what your long-term career goals are, and as tied to, like, will the school help me get there, right? And and the fact of the matter is that our 20, Tucker, whoever may not be in the M7, they can absolutely be exceptional in help, and even better than in helping you get to what those long-term career goals are. And so, I think this is an excellent slide, for us to take away and look, but certainly, the M7, like something, the less common profile, something truly that catches the eyes, like, oh man, I want that person in the class, because that's so cool, right? Let's, and certainly, or if there's a gap, and that's a little hit or miss. If I'm trying to make sure that my average GMAT stays as high as it can for MBA rankings, right? And you have a strong GMAT, then that's going to help you in kind of the next level after the R7, that are less sensitive to the GMAT, because they just have such a strong pool, or classes, I want international perspective, and I just don't have it because international students aren't applying. So so that's, those are a couple high level thoughts on this slide. One other thing I don't want to digress, but one last bucket is if you've been laid off. I just don't want, we can put that in the parking lot for a second, but absolutely, it makes sense why you're applying, and all these 3 buckets apply, but it's okay, right? And in some ways easier to explain. So those are a couple thoughts.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Michelle, I was just going to say one other thing to think about, is, whilst I'm looking particularly here at the international program, so INSEAD, LBS, ESA, all of those kind of schools, one of the things that I think you do need to bear in mind when you are trying to decide between round 3 and the upcoming round 1, is that when you apply in round 3, whilst the latter rounds are built into the admissions process more obviously than they are in the US, you are going to come up against waitlist candidates, right? So that's something you have to think about, is that from round one and round two, strong candidates who are perhaps have a more common profile, or come from an overrepresented demographic, or whatever it might be, are likely to be placed on the wait list. And if they have not been accepted at other schools, they're going to be sitting there waiting for their opportunity to come into the class. Now, what that does mean is, even if there are fewer numbers in round three, you are sometimes going to be coming up against some really good candidates still who are on the wait list from earlier in the season. So I think that's just something to think about when you are trying to balance, should I apply now or should I wait? If your demographic is something that you know is overrepresented, I think even now, round three is probably still, I think you're probably still better to apply in round one. Michelle, I don't know how you feel about that, but I do feel quite strongly that for some of our clients, I would still be saying round one is going to be better for you.
I mean, I would agree. I think the points that you made are very valid. So it is, I mean, I hope our discussion today, and Jonathan and Emma's points of view, and just is so helpful, but it's really a personal kind of reflection, just to be like, where am I at? And again, where do I put myself at the best? Like we talked with our clients, every year, is to give them the best chance, the strongest profile. To Emma's point, the puzzle pieces, like strategically, all the pieces of your story and presenting them, where are you at? Right? So I think it's just something to consider, but it is a special year that if you really, again, we're thinking round two, like we've said all these things, that this could be your moment, right? So as we kind of go, maybe it's not your moment. What are my alternatives, right? Like if you've reflected, and I think we've touched on these, Jonathan, but just to take us through quickly, what are some other, okay, I don't know if the round three is a good fit. What should I be thinking about next?
What the heck should I, what should I be doing? I think, it's all anchored in hey, hypothesis is that I want to do an MBA, right? The MBA is going to help me get to where I want to be. And I'm going to be better served to be deliberate, thoughtful, and preparing for and applying and getting into the best program, because I know myself and I know the schools, right? So, so if you're not quite there, there are ways, and this is what I was thinking about, you can kind of dual track in a sense of I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I'm always, you test business concepts and you do it quickly and you try to learn as much as you want, as you can, right? So you can say, listen, maybe I'll do round three and I'm going to go through the motion. I'm going to spend 2 weeks. I'm going to pick my top 3 schools. I'm going to look at the essays. I'm going to talk to my recommenders. I'm going to, go online and visit the schools. I'm going to sign up. And and at the end of those 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to decide, okay, not a fit. Great. So, but I'm better off because I'm smarter. I've learned more. I'm deliberately deciding not to do round three because it's just not the right fit. Not because I can't get in, which is what it was last year. This year you can get in, but so okay, I've done that, right? I've come to this, I've had this wonderful chat with my buddy Emma and Michelle and this guy and Jonathan, and they're, MBA sounds cool, and I've thought about it. I'm not going to do it this year, but right, this is what you should do, right? And you want to get, and this is, I go back to get as much clarity as you can on where you want to be. And long-term goals, 10 to 15 years. I want to run a company. I want to be a managing director in a private equity firm. I want to, create a business, a startup that scales and helps people with healthcare issues using, in remote, and, but if you can do that work, right, it's just going to make your application stronger, your why MBA and everything, and then do things that are going to help improve your profile. And it could be at work where you volunteer to be part of an internal organization that's socially minded because you have a gap between what schools look for and your extracurriculars, or I score poorly, but I know if I grind through it, I can get that score. And I'm going to A/B test the GRE and the GMAT. I'm going to take them both, see which one I'm better at. I'm going to focus on it, and I'm going to get the score because I know I'm smart enough. And so then I'm going to improve my profile, and those are those are my thoughts on how best to be deliberate. And by the way, I'm going to do it at round one because that is the optimal time to apply. And I'm going to, when I go on vacation, I'm going to go, visit all the schools in Boston. And when I go see the Boston Red Sox play and, see my buddies, I'm going to go to, MIT, I'm going to see the Hard, I'm going to go visit me and talk, so those are something. And I think, Emma, maybe talk on the international in January.
Yeah, so there are schools like INSEAD have a January intake, and that's definitely a good opportunity if you have come to the decision that actually it's not right for you to apply in a later round for September. INSEAD has a brilliant January intake. They have the two campuses, so one in Singapore, one in Fontainebleau in France. I have two clients that have just started, one in France and one in Singapore in January, who are, it's a baptism of fire in INSEAD. It's a 1 year program. Well, January is actually a 12-month. So if you are looking at INSEAD, then the 10-month option in September, you can't do an internship. But if you want to do an internship, there's a January intake, you can do. So that is definitely an option. Round one for that is in March. So there are options out there. Columbia has a J term. So different schools have different entry points, and it's not a one size fits all, right? Sometimes you just have to think about what is right for you, which school is right for you, which intake, and what time is best.
Yeah, those are such great. I mean, those approaches by Jonathan and Emma, just to like how to think about it and approach it, is extremely helpful. And here we've even put together a little bit of a framework, like Jonathan was saying, I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, I kind of love the, take 2 weeks and see it, right? Like, I think, but Emma, you can walk us through this. It's like, what will get me to okay, the answer is yes, the answer is no. Like, where do I come out? Because we really want to help you all, really how you are thinking about this, because we do feel like there is this opportunity that many people can take advantage of.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, this framework is great, right? You've got four
Yeah.
questions. It is like a yes, no. It's like those things where you head off in a particular path. I mean, one thing I would say is that we do work with candidates at this point in the year. It's a little bit quieter for us, so it's a great time to seek out advice, have a chat with a coach, see if that's something that you are, you are going to be realistically able to achieve. So firstly, are you competitive? Look at the different components of your application, your test scores. Are your recommenders ready? Have you had that recent promotion at work? Do you have a good story that you can share with the admissions committee, and are your goals ready to share? And can you defend them? Do your goals make sense in what is a competitive environment? Am I fully committed to my schools? Which schools are you targeting? As we talked about, outreach, make sure it's done, make sure that you've got a track record of interest and evaluation in these different schools, because I think one thing that it's really important to say is, yes, the schools get to choose you, but you should also be choosing the school that's right for you. And we talk about fit all the time in our industry, but it is really important that you take time to make sure that you are targeting a school where you're going to have the best experience. It's a big investment, so you want to make sure that the ROI is maximized for you. Timing. So if you know, for example, that you have a really, really busy quarter coming up, or you have a huge project that's due, this might not be the right time for you. You can't ever rush, or you shouldn't ever rush. So you can. I think 3 days is the shortest I've ever put an application together for somebody, or with somebody, but you shouldn't rush, and if you want to do this properly, then you need to invest time. There's self-reflection, there is strategic planning of all the different parts of your application, but it does take time. So you need to make sure that, that you can invest that time. And yeah, recommenders again. So we want to make sure that those are on board, because if they are not, some schools still require two, some schools require one, but at the end of the day, a poor recommendation can really torpedo an application. So you do need to make sure that you spend time getting people on board and really making them aware of what's required as well. So if no, think about your candidacy. How can you improve your candidacy between now and September? And if yes, absolutely go ahead. And yeah, we would love to speak with you. So
yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, you guys, such expert advice and thoughtfulness, and so helpful to me to understand, but to everyone watching. Quickly, before we get into Q&A, just, We all are here with Fortuna, as Emma said, so happy to speak with people right now, thinking about the round three, is that the right choice? What would that look like? Or, going, next year and pursuing round one. We, as you see, for the three of us, all from different backgrounds of schools and where we're living right now. And so have many, many years of experience of approaching and working across all the global and US schools. And we are happy to speak with all of you and do some free consultations and discuss your backgrounds and what you're, looking to pursue within different MBA programs. And this is the way to connect with us. So please, definitely follow up. We have the free consultations, and we have many videos posted on our YouTube channel. I just did one last week, like Emma mentioned, about interviews, but many topics that we hope you find helpful. And we so appreciate you all being with us today. And now we are going to jump into some Q&A. And I have not been able to look at it yet. I'm going to see if we can, there we go. So see if I can look. I don't know if Emma or Jonathan, if you looked at any of the questions and where we want to jump in first. I saw that we had some coming in.
So I'm just going to very quickly go the first one. What is considered exceptional? So what is considered exceptional will depend on the school that you're applying to, and it depends on you and your particular expertise, experience, and background. But for me, what is considered exceptional is somebody who has spent time thinking about what they want out of an MBA, how they are going to contribute to the program whilst they are there, and how the MBA will help them achieve what are a kind of combination of ambitious and realistic career goals. And if you can put all that together, tie it in a nice bow with outstanding essays that showcase your leadership and a nice high test score and extracurricular profile that's really stand out, I would say that's exceptional. That sound fair?
I think that sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I can see that. Okay, let's see. Will a profile of a real estate venture capital consultant can be another example for M7? So go ahead, Jonathan.
I'll take that. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a pretty nuanced, sector, right? It's pretty specific, so it's differentiated. I don't like, from my perspective, we got enough consultants. I like more, not general consultants. I definitely like the real estate. I haven't seen as many people in real estate, so I would, it depends on the whole application. But I think that deep passion for a knowledge base around real estate could really add to add to a class. And then you start to think about, like, hey, I'm going to lead the real estate club, or, and I'm going to use the MBA to transition from being a consultant to being a developer, or work for a REIT or work for a private equity firm, globally investing in real estate. So I think that, I think it could definitely, make sense. That's my 2 cents.
I agree. It's always thinking about, like, what perspective, to your point, Jonathan, are you going to be bringing with that background? Okay, which M7 schools and which non-M7 schools, but within the top 15 programs in the US, have historically been more receptive to round 3 applicants?
This was asked elsewhere too, so I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not Harvard.
Well,
Not Harvard.
Harvard's out. Harvard is out. Receptive, I will say, again, we think this year is very different because, let's be honest, in the past, they haven't been receptive. Few and far between. We kind of said you need to be this special star that maybe aligns with what they needed to complete their class. You never knew, right? There's no, special, look into the future, but this year's different. And that's why I think we've discussed that and why that is. Would you have anything different to add, Emma or Jonathan?
I guess it's like where we see more data points is around managing the wait list historically, right? Because that's going to be a proxy for round 2. And we just sees more in our own schools, but certainly I've seen people at Tuck come off early June. And that's an example, but I think Tuck is representative of like a Fuqua Darden, I'm trying to think of Ross, those schools that are going to continue to look, and I think so if you have a high GPA, again, that's a score that goes into the rankings. I think you're gonna see greater success. So couple thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's see. Again, Emma or Jonathan, if you've read one, jump in.
Yeah, the layoff one is just, I mean, I dual track again. Like I do two paths. I look at the MBA and I look for a job. But it sucks to get laid off, but it's structural, right? Amazon laid off 20,000 people. So what are you going to do? Jeff Bezos didn't want me to work there anymore. So the schools are going to be receptive to that. It's not like you were dawdling. And it was structural. So I think, and one thing that we help you tell stories, and I think we can help you create a compelling story for the layoff and why MBA, and then why beyond. But you'll know pretty quickly about the MBA if you do round 3 versus a job search, and then it's tough to do a job search, and then if you did want to do MBA, leave in a few months. So again, like you look at yourself, I got laid off, but no, it happens, and let's turn it as a positive and make it a positive in your application.
I think it depends a bit also, A, how long you've been laid off for, and B, what you've been doing in that space of time. If you have been really proactive in searching for a job, but also if you've been filling your time meaningfully through, I don't know, mentoring or learning a new skill or whatever it is, and you can share that information, and that will make a difference as well. And admissions committees, they're people as well, and they know, everybody's aware of what's going on at the moment, and these big rounds of layoffs. So yeah, I don't think, as long as you can be sort of intentional about what you've been doing, I think you'll probably be okay this year.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I totally agree with you.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if you saw this question, but if international applicant volumes, obviously we've mentioned to the US schools, have declined, is that making it, do you believe, for the round 3 going to be more competitive at an LBS INSEAD?
Yeah, so we've been talking about this, the Trump slump versus the Trump bump, which is kind of how it's panned out. I was talking to Caroline, one of our directors, about this last week, and she's had her ear to the ground at INSEAD. We haven't heard that there's been a massive increase in volume. I haven't yet heard back. I have posed this question to LBS, so I'm interested to hear. I just haven't heard back yet. INSEAD, obviously, they have 2 campuses, they have 2 intakes, so I think that tends to meter out a little bit. My question really is, if the international schools, will know more at the end of the season, but if they don't see a Trump bump, what does that mean for the wider industry more generally? From my list of clients, and I guess you guys as well, most people I talk to still see the MBA as a really strong investment, but I think potentially there's been a bit of a wait and see attitude this year. There's so much economic uncertainty, and the geopolitical situation has been tricky. So sometimes I wonder if numbers are just down this year, it may just mean people have been holding fire a little bit. But if that's the case, I would expect potentially a bump next year, because I think there are these big rounds of layoffs. And historically, I mean, yeah, been in the business for a while now, when there are layoffs the next year, there are big applications to business school. If people can't get jobs in the meantime, they use the redundancy pay or whatever to fund their education and upskill. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely what we've seen in the past. Trying to see if we can. I will say, I don't know if we're going to get to everyone's questions, and we so appreciate them, that please reach out to us. Like these are things that we do want to, discuss with you and your specific, profile and background. But I was just going to see if there are any other questions that kind of cover,
There's a really good one there, Michelle, about higher expectations for round 3 applicants, given they've had more time.
Yep, I see that.
I don't think that's true. I think the bar is pretty high right through the year. So you just have to put your best foot forward. If you are prepared and thoughtful about it, it's pretty much across the board similar, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Oh, and I just see one, will a candidate from the mining industry from a developing country be considered as a not very common profile? I would say so. Again, what do you think, Jonathan?
Responded. I had a client
did you?
in the mining industry that got into a few from India from a few schools. So yeah, absolutely. Very, very cool. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Mm.
definitely very interesting. For
Cool.
international students, do you see the environment being similar as it is now, for round one? Okay, Emma just covered that. So I think that does,
Mm,
we aren't quite sure again from our experience in the past, but it's TBD.
mm,
But again, that's why I think we're having this discussion because I think right now this round three is just, we're in a different place than we've been in the past. And we aren't really quite sure what round one will ultimately look like, but a round one is a round one. So we do know that in terms of, what they expectations, and
mm.
expectations that someone just asked, will be the same for round three. And I see that we are just coming up on the hour, and I really appreciate everyone sticking with us. I just want to make sure if there's any other, let's see. One more profile. Okay, how about this profile for an M7 Indian applicant working as a strategy head at a sports league with a 705 GMAT? Okay, I mean, again, strategy, sports league, something different. Again, there's many different pieces of your profile, I'm sure, to discuss. But again, right there, what perspective have you had? What kind of opportunities? Like these are things, again, on a call that you'd have with us or
Mm.
as a coach. But I think that is something that, again, the 705 GMAT, like, right, you're in the discussion. Again, to Jonathan's point that he's been talking about, like, maybe just like 1 year, get 1 year up on everything if this is your time, right? Like, so do it now rather than putting it off to round one. If you've really been thoughtful about this, it's definitely in your plan and MBA. So,
Mm.
again, I hope this has helped. I've really enjoyed. Thank you, Emma and Jonathan, for your time and your thoughtful comments and background to, what we think about round three, the profiles, and just like how to approach it. And we are here as Fortuna to kind of help you, think about this and if it's a right choice for you or is it round one. But we thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Hopefully, I will send sunshine to everyone from Los Angeles that we do
We
have
need it.
here, and appreciate everyone and to be well. So thank you so much. Thank you, Emma and Jonathan.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you,
Take care.
Michelle.
Okay,
Yep.
take care. Bye.